the weather may be bright, but I suspect it's a bit gloomy in number 10.
Really is.
And also actually in the House of Commons, and we'll explore it all. But I mean, the question is, how long does Boris survive?
Yeah.
Not if he survives. It's
Yes.
just a question of how long. For my mind, what I'm hearing, I mean, Tory MPs are being inundated with furious constituents. There's still a few cabinet ministers who still think this is much ado about nothing,
right?
Which
is extraordinary, isn't it?
Shows just how out of touch they really are with people's feelings. And I think the image of the Queen sitting there at the funeral of Prince Philip, whilst number 10 staff were recovering from huge hangovers from the party the night before, even though Boris wasn't there.
Yeah.
I think that's the final
Well,
straw.
it tells you everything you need to know about the atmosphere inside the place where the rules are being made, where clearly nobody cares about the rules that they've made, and they don't pay any attention to them. I mean, sending somebody to the nearest, I presume, probably the Tesco's down by the tube station to pick up a load of wine, put it in a suitcase and bring it back. I mean, they're apparently doing this pretty much every Friday.
It's unbelievable. And the thing that really strikes me, look, lots of us didn't agree with the rules.
Yeah.
And, the collateral damage from lockdown. But the fact that these people who were making the rules, knowing that actually they weren't afraid of the virus, and yet they made rules that required people not to be able to say goodbye to their loved ones who were dying alone in hospitals, in care homes, not being able to bury their loved ones if they had sadly died, and so they were having to, the funerals with almost nobody present, whilst this was going on. I think that's the biggest, most emotional mountain of fury that is bubbling over. It's like a volcano that is now erupting.
Because everybody was looking back at the May 2020 date to see what they were doing, and everyone from Piers Morgan to me to anybody could find a picture of some kind or other showing that whatever the rules were, most of us were adhering to them. And in May 2020, certainly, I think I hadn't seen my own children in Sussex for like 8 weeks because I thought I shouldn't go there in case it's the wrong thing to do. And so people have been, and I've been a heartbreaking call from a guy during the week called Joe who lost his 5-year-old son run over.
Yeah, I heard
and he couldn't have more than 5 people at the funeral. I mean, this is not a laughing matter. And Boris, until Wednesday, on Tuesday, was still laughing about it.
Yes, and I think that is the thing that is going to tip everybody over the edge. And I think that the Tory MPs are going to have to say he's going to have to at least set a timetable for his departure.
Yeah.
And I mean, no one knows how long Sue Gray's going to take to release her report.
Well,
whether it's a week or a fortnight.
What the hell is she investigating at this point? Because he's already confessed to being there.
Yes.
He's already said that there were other events that he knows about.
There's multiple things that come off it, almost like a sort of octopus. Actually, who was there? What should be the sanctions to those people who were there? Because they're all essentially guilty of breaking the rules that they made. Whether or not the police get involved, that's clearly going to be very uncomfortable for them. And then there's the discussion that was happening on Jeremy's show this morning about, okay, so should they all be fined? Or maybe everybody who was fined should have their money returned to them. Because clearly it's not sustainable to fine, I don't know how many, thousands of people, police fines, hundreds of pounds, whilst those in number 10 were partying. It's just not sustainable. I don't know where it goes.
And those who defend Boris still, and some of them are listeners to this show and been giving me a hard time for the last few days, saying, why are you turning into the BBC and Sky and having a go at the Prime Minister? He's our only hope. Well, actually, he's not, because, to be honest, he is now dragging the Conservative Party down. They're 10 points behind Labour. He's handing the chalice of power to Sir Keir Starmer by his antics, isn't it?
I was one of the first to see it knocking on the doors of Bexley last November when he turned from being an asset to being a liability when the first allegations came out about Owen Paterson and about
that was the beginning of
the first party.
Of the
that was the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And it's just been a very long, slippery, slidey slope ever since.
Yes.
And there's more to come.
Well,
there's
that's
more
the worry,
news to come.
Because he hasn't been clean and he hasn't been honest and he hasn't been sort of upfront with everybody. What he should have done on Wednesday, instead of making a sort of mealy-mouthed apology and then telling his MPs it wasn't his fault and he was sorry, but there really wasn't anything he could have done about it. You know, he should have said, and by the way, there is a whole litany of parties that we can tell you about, which we will release in a document tomorrow.
But it's worse than that, Mike, because actually he should have done that when he stood up in front of the House of Commons just before Christmas.
When he was appalled and horrified.
When he was appalled and furious
Yes.
by what had happened with the Allegra Stratton video and that party. That was the moment when he should have said, but instead he didn't. He tried to say, I've been assured there were no parties.
Yeah.
There weren't parties, and I'm furious.
And he's still saying that. I mean, I don't think he actually understands that he's done anything wrong. I think he does genuinely think that the rules don't apply to him, and indeed they don't apply to Downing Street.
And you know, people say that a fish rots from the head, but it's a culture. Leadership is about setting a culture within your team, within your division, within your workplace, within your office, within Number 10. And he set a culture that we're the elite, it doesn't matter, we're setting the rules, but we're not afraid of this virus. And therefore
I'm
we will
sure
just
you
carry
know
on.
people, as I do, who've been going in and out of Downing Street for the last 2 years, one way and another, who have always said to me, you walk in there, you wouldn't know there was a pandemic. You know, everybody's acting as if there's nothing going differently. Everybody's in each other's offices all the time. People sit around having coffee together. There's no masks being worn.
So
they put masks on as they come out the front door.
But you then have to ask the question, why were they trying to impose rules on the rest of the population that were brutal, totally insensitive, uncaring, and have led to the most unbelievable collateral damage in terms of devastation to people's mental health, suicides, excess deaths.
Well, they've more or less killed off the NHS, haven't they? I mean, talk about saving the NHS. They've actually more or less killed it.
Why were they doing that to the rest of the population when they weren't afraid of it themselves and they knew it was wrong? And so the whole thing essentially was like a piece of theatre.
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, the mindset is extraordinary. And I just can't get my head around it.
No, it does seem remarkable. I mean, people keep asking me from Tonya Buxton down, you know, what have they been doing it for? Why? And I can't answer that question. I don't know. I don't know.
But what I always remind myself and people is when we don't understand a decision, you have to follow the money.
Yes.
And in a sense, they were listening to one line of science and there's so much money involved in so many different directions. And I think there's a lot more to come out about
Well,
this.
when you think about the test and trace and 37 billion, two stories this week which kind of went without much coverage at all. The PPE scandal, two companies apparently were given contracts unlawfully.
Yes.
Now, that would be a massive story normally, but it's kind of been washed away.
Completely washed underway. And all credit to the people involved in bringing that project. The Good Law Project, I think, have mainly driven it. But it's not actually just two companies. It's the whole principle of that VIP lane. And yes, they may still have been awarded the contracts. But let me tell you, I know a couple of people who have made millions and millions of pounds, literally for making a couple of phone calls, acting as an introducer. And I think it's revolting. I think it's disgusting. I think it's reprehensible. At a time when
it's our money they're taking.
It's our money that they're taking at a time when actually we were saying we're all in this together. You know, let's try and get through this. And no, some people were literally just racketeering, making as much as they could. And I think it absolutely infuriates me. That, and then I'm going to be talking on Sunday about the companies that won't give furlough money back, even though we're making vast profits. There's a day of reckoning.
Yes.
In many, many ways, not just at Number 10, but for companies that have taken the mickey, for individuals that have financially taken the mickey. There is a day of reckoning.
And I think the parties are the metaphor for the way that the government has been running this country. And that is what annoys people. It's not so much that people had a drink or that they maybe had a little dance or they had a DJ or they were walking around with suitcases full of wine. It's that kind of mentality that they clearly have, which is to show absolute disdain, disrespect to the rest of the country.
It's extraordinary and it's utterly inexplicable.
Yeah.
And I think that the Conservatives are going to feel the voters' wrath in the May elections. So, yeah, it's just utterly extraordinary.
It is amazing. And as if that wasn't enough to talk about, this extraordinary story yesterday that broke in Parliament about China, about a Chinese agent who's been donating money to the Labour Party and specifically to Barry Gardner, and also has been fraternising with all sorts of people in the House of Lords and in the House of Commons.
I mean, this is extraordinary, and I've tweeted out this morning, I think there needs to be a full-blown inquiry. This has been known about for years and years.
Well,
and
the
years.
Times put it on the front page 2017.
2017 about this. I mean, Barry Gardner's office has taken £500,000, give or take, maybe just over 400 grand, from basically what turns out to be a Chinese spy, close links to the communist regime. And you're thinking, hang on, so he's taken some. There's suggestions from Guido that Ed Davey took money whilst he was energy minister back in 2013. My point is that the naivety of the Conservative government since 2010, from Cameron to Osborne to Theresa May to the establishment to Boris, who wanted Huawei to be involved in our sort of core telecoms infrastructure, to Theresa May, who foolishly allowed the Chinese to fund and be involved in the engineering of Hinkley Point. I mean, all of this stuff, the naivety. And then you have to look at, well, okay, so what about all the grants to the research institutions, the Chinese grants to all our universities?
Well, all the university chairs are now pretty much owned by China, right?
I think there should be a full, open, transparent inquiry covering the last, give or take, 20 years of all the institutions, all the MPs, all the peers who have taken money from anybody in China who therefore may or may not have links to the Chinese communist regime. Because the Chinese must be laughing in their baths, their bedrooms, wherever, at our naivety, our stupidity. We literally invited them into the front door of the British establishment, not even the back door.
Right. Well, I mean, they haven't finished laughing yet about the COP26 ludicrous sort of scenario where everyone was going to get them to sign up to some kind of, no, we're not going to use any coal anymore. Oh, really? I don't think so. But people have been asking me, Barry Gardner, really? Is he the guy that they've targeted? And also, what the hell has he spent 170,000 quid on in terms of his research projects?
Who knows? But of course, it's not just money. He employed
her son.
He employed her son, all out in the open.
Right.
And I mean, you just couldn't make this up. I mean, in a sense, it comes down to complete and utter naivety. Fundamentally, I blame Cameron and Osborne for opening the door and being totally unaware of the risks. Just imagine doing this with people at the heart of the Kremlin.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff is it's so extraordinary. And I think that we need nothing less than a full inquiry. It won't be just Barry Gardner. There will be others.
And also, it won't just be this one woman who is being named as the spy in question. There's going to be loads of people doing exactly what she's been doing up and down every single establishment area of the country.
And this is what we know about on the surface. There will be much more deeper down. And I think it is a massive wake-up call to everybody as to what's been going on, and frankly, how foolish Westminster has been, how naive they've been. And as you just quite rightly touch on, the implications are huge. Whilst Westminster is receiving cash from the Chinese communist regime and their associates and affiliates, it's the British people, ordinary families up and down the country, that are expected to pay cash to China to try and achieve net zero. It's madness. I don't think the people will put up with it. I'm going to be battling and campaigning and talking about this for this year and next year, because I think it's one of the most important issues of the day.
Obviously, and it seems to me that here we are talking about these incredibly important stories. We've got a government that is kind of literally hanging by a thread. We've got people running the government who literally don't know what they're doing. There's people running MI5 who seemingly don't know what they're doing, and we're paying for it all. And we're the mugs, basically. We're sitting here getting stooped in the vernacular, which I think I can say. Too late if I can't. And we're just getting. I'm sorry, I can't even say what we're getting.
It seems that people in number 10, the only running they're doing is to the local supermarket with a suitcase to fill it up with booze.
I mean, I guess for one thing is good that it won't be having a party this Friday. You would hope.
Who knows?
Maybe there'll be another leaving do.
It's hard to say, but I think that people are utterly aghast.
Yeah.
And it's the core of the establishment and our institutions are being found out. And fundamentally, the people, we trust our institutions. We've always been told the civil service is the envy of the world and that we're so lucky.
Well, it was when they were still in the office, but they don't seem to have been there for a while.
Well, I think we're all learning a great deal. The reality is that productivity is collapsing. You try and get a passport or a driving license within a sensible time frame.
Well, funnily enough, I've got to go to the passport office tomorrow, so I'll be reporting back.
Good luck with that. You might need to start queuing this evening. That might interfere with dinner.
And they've got this series of rules that they've sent saying only one person in a lift at a time. Please observe all social distancing. You may have to remove your mask in order to be identified. Huh?